Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest news stories in MMA. On today's episode, Tom Aspinall, he will be at MSG in November, but will he be wearing his normal duds or Venom gear? That's the question. And people, didn't you learn from the Alpha Betas in the 1980s? Don't mess with them nerds. Plus, Dana White says some of his guys are stupid. We'll tell you all about it. Hello, everyone. Gorgeous George here on the con, and look at the distinguished panel we have for you today. Nolan King out in Boston, always bringing the heat. Matt Wells in Dallas, Texas, stepping in on late notice. Love his takes. And Mike Bond doing double duty. Thinks he's Deion Sanders or Bo Jackson or something. He's going to be a panelist and producer. So buckle up, folks. Here we go. Before we get started, though, please kindly hit that like button. Nolan swears he'll take that Celtics logo or banner down before the next VC if you can do us that solid. So please, folks, he's driving us nuts. And don't stop there. Smash that subscribe button. You'll have access to a whole library of videos, including some past SBCs. Let's get going. Guys, Caio Borralho defeated Jared Cannonier in the main event at UFC on ESPN 62 this past Saturday. Solid fight. They got $50K each for that. And now Borralho is on the map, or maybe he's already been. I don't know. Quick reaction to the fight first, guys, and then and the result itself. We'll start with Nolan King. What did you think, man, of Caio Borralho and his performance?
It was a great fight. I mean, he leveled up. He put himself in the conversation. At 185 pounds. Great action fight. I don't think you could ask for much more there from these two guys. I think it was kind of weird, right? It was thrown together seemingly somewhat last second. We heard about this like 3 weeks ago. And for this to come together, one of the better Apex main events we've seen, and the action was fantastic as well. So I think 2 thumbs up for me. He really instilled himself at the top of this division. I think him calling out the champion afterwards, while it was pretty far-fetched, right, that fight's going to happen next, it was good to get that name coming out of his mouth and for him to kind of start making that sort of chatter. And I think the fighting nerds as well, he furthered them on the map. The rising team in MMA now has a main event win under their belt. So got to give him 2 thumbs up all around. Fun fight, good performance, proved that he's legit and that he can fight the top contenders. And I think people are going to be very excited to see what's next from him.
Matt Wells, could you believe it? He out-cardioed one of the cardio kings in Jared Cannonier. This guy was impressive from start to finish.
Yeah, it was a very impressive performance. And I want to highlight something that I think not a lot of people are talking about this fight. I think he got robbed of a TKO stoppage here. You look at the way he dropped Jared late in that fight. I think if he just walks away, that's a TKO stoppage right there, or even a KO, however the ref decides to call it. Fantastic performance all around, though. I think he did very well. A lot of people were expecting to see him come in and shoot for takedowns and implement his grappling. Stood and traded with Jared the entire fight, which was very impressive. Man, I couldn't say enough good things about this performance for him. And you only expect bigger things going forward. To go ahead and do that against a former title challenger, guy who's got wins in 3 weight classes in the UFC, man, very, very impressive stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mike Bond, what did you think, man? This division's popping. We got another title contender here, it looks like.
Yeah, he's good, man. I think he's obviously 7-0 in the UFC. You got to be very solid to get off to a run like that. And you do wonder, like, the circumstances of this fight, right? Jared making the quick turnaround off the Imavov fight, 40 years old. Is this finally the point where like the age and everything starts to catch up with him? But you don't want to take away from Caio's win either. He did what he needed to do. And I spoke to Jared ahead of the fight. He seemed very comfortable with the situation, with his turnaround and all that stuff. And especially his mentality. He said he was finally able to like let go of title contention and certain things going into this fight, and he was going to be able to fight more freely. And Borralho basically schooled him when he came in with saying all like the right things. So I think that's a big feather in his cap, and it's always good to have fresh faces in this middleweight division. And a guy like him, I think, definitely has the potential to do big things. I don't know if he's ready for a title shot quite yet, but this is what you need to really get over the hump and kind of validate your career, put that big signature win on your resume, and now you're off to the races.
You're right. He definitely schooled them. Them nerds always schooling us, man, especially when we have to do additional math homework and stuff. It's not supposed to happen in the octagon, though. This guy is no joke, though. How about this? He wants to be the next Ferreira, Matt Wells. Do you like that confidence, or should he slow down a little bit and tap the brakes? Because Pereira's a stud, man.
I mean, yeah, we saw that line dropped a couple of times that night, didn't we? Everybody wants to be the next Alex Pereira. It's a good thing. It's a good shout. I mean, it's kind of like how everybody was saying they want to be the next Conor a few years ago. So it works. You know, you liken yourself to the biggest name in the sport at the time, and that's what these guys are doing right now. So I liked it. I don't know if it's an accurate comparison, but sure, it works.
What about you, Nolan? Do you like the comparison? He's off to just as impressive of a start, and his resume matches Pereira. Heck, it's even more impressive in the terms of wins and losses without leaving the titles aside. He's got better numbers on him too right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really understand the comparison totally. I think Kyle's shown to fight various different ways and kind of go out there and at times do what's intelligent to do to get the victory. Like this was the first one where I think he kind of went out there and just kind of banged, right? Not that he's not had good fights before. We saw him knock out Paul Craig. We've seen him, have some fun fights, but I felt like this was one where he just kind of engaged in the mayhem over a longer span than just the finish. So I think, he's trying to explode on the scene. He's a personality. He's Brazilian. He gets knockouts. So there are some similarities, but I think you kind of setting the bar a little high there and just stylistically and impact wise, like there's no storyline with Izzy, something like that early on in his career. So yeah. I appreciate that that's what that a lot of fighters are gunning for, to be the next Alex Pereira. But I do think you set yourself up there for a little bit of not necessarily failure, but if you're standing next to the hottest star in MMA, no matter how good you are, you're not necessarily going to look like you live up to that sort of expectation.
Mm-hmm. Mike, before we start anointing someone as a championship fighter, they got to tick a few boxes. Now this guy went a full 5 rounds. Now this guy took out a former title challenger. So he ticked a couple there, right? Impressed all of us. But what's really his road to the title? If you had to break it down, you're excellent at this, at those pieces that you do after the big shows. Because remember, it looks like Strickland next. Izzy's not out of the game, so he's never far away. And then you got that big fight with Whitaker and Khamzat Chimaev. So what do you think, man? Does Ohio need 1 fight, 2 fights? What's the outlook in your opinion?
Yeah, it is interesting, right? Because you also have Brendan Allen fighting Nasruddin Imavov at UFC Paris, and you'd have to imagine both of those guys are probably ahead of Kaio as well. Obviously, Imavov beat him first and finished him, even though you could say, Kaio should have got the finish in this fight, but regardless, on paper, his was controversial. Whatever. Brendan Allen, I think if he wins that, it would be 8 in a row at middleweight, 7 or 8 in a row overall, 7 in a row at middleweight. So he's getting a nice resume. It's tough to imagine him like jumping over. So maybe he fights like the winner of that fight in Paris, the loser maybe of Whitaker and Khamzat could be an option as well. I can't imagine Israel Adesanya fighting a guy like this. I mean, maybe someone else feels differently, but you'd think that would be the appropriate next step, right? Like, is he 1-3 in the past 4 back-to-back losses? Like, this is how you prove yourself that you're still relevant, can still be that big guy in the division. But is he willing to do something like that? Or is he going to pursue like bigger names, money fights? But if you're Adesanya and you want to show like, I can be a contender here, Caio Borralho is the type of guy you should be fighting. I just can't necessarily see that happening. So his path isn't super clear here. I think his best bet, even though he has that nasty cut under his eye and took some damage in there, keep ready, man. Like, one of these guys falls out of one of these fights, Khamzat doesn't make it to the fight again, that you want to be there so they can call you and step into that situation. I think that's probably his best path forward, and just being ready and having the opportunity in front of you. And if you can pounce on one of those, you're going to be in a really good spot.
Yeah, for sure. And who knows what you hear with so many channels out there in terms of what's happening with Khamzat Chimaev. I really want to see the fight with him versus Whitaker. But Nolan, I want to go back to you because you and Abby Subham did an interesting project, a nice piece on the Fighting Nerds. This is pretty much their captain. He kind of started things here. Caio Borralho did. What an impact these guys have had. Oh, first of all, congrats. Great piece. And talk about the impact these guys have had on the scene, in general, and including obviously Borralho.
Yeah, they've I think that performance on Saturday is what makes them known. Will get them known to people that are maybe more casual fans, right? But those of us who have been following MMA, pretty hardcore in recent years, and particularly the most recent year, have seen the emergence of the fighting nerds. You hear it on the broadcast, you hear that name, and it kind of grips you a little bit, right? It's like, oh, in a world full of pit bulls and Warrior Gym and whatever else, like, to kind of use a name like that, it's great branding. I mean, first and foremost. And Pablo Supira, I believe his last name is. My Portuguese isn't great, but he has done an excellent job with that team. He was a former Thai champion, a boxing champion, and he has a marketing background. So that's where the fighting nerds came from. But they've done a great job. He's kind of handled the striking, he's the headest coach of them all. And then you got Flavio Alvaro and Wagner Moda as well, who Alvaro is a very well-established pro kind of combat sports athlete in all different disciplines. Like, he did MMA, he did bare knuckle fights. Like, he was a very established guy on the regional scene in Brazil. So he kind of came in as an MMA coach. And then you got Wagner Moda, who used to work with Damian Maia in the grappling department. So they've really figured out the chemistry, no pun intended, behind making a great team. I mean, they have Kyle Barallo, who is 7-0 now in the UFC. John Silva is 3-0. Carlos Prats 3-0. Mauricio Hufi's 1-0. And then they also brought in Bruno Brazil, who just had a win over Molly McCann, and Thiago Moises, who's a vet. And they have a whole host of other fighters that are kind of waiting to get in. So really excellent job. Their success rate, their win rate in the UFC is fantastic right now. It's been a huge year. So maybe they're not as established, maybe they're newer, but I think certainly they should be in some sort of conversation for team of the year, gym of the year, if this keeps up by the end of 2024, because they're on fire. They're interesting. They all have different personalities. And the thing is, to be honest with you, like, there's not a whole ton of similarities between these fighters. Like, sure, there's some things that are the same, but there's a lot of variance between their styles as well. So I think Pablo and the rest of the team has done a really excellent job of game planning and really kind of molding and crafting each individual fight preparation around their own fighter's abilities and as well as what the opponent is going to show. So really, really good job of bursting on the scene by these guys.
Yeah, and then again, a big shout out to you, Abby Subhan. That's Kamikaze, who does our cool graphic arts for thumbnails on Spinning Back Clique. A lot of you often ask about that. Go check it out, folks. It's still obviously live on the site. You just got to do a little bit of scrolling, and obviously the YouTube channel. Always telling you about it. Subscribe. You get great content. Kind of gives me vibes of City Kickboxing back in 2018, 2019. The way these guys are making that splash, and they got their figurehead leading the way in Bohayo, another middleweight. So we'll see what happens with that. Now, this card, UFC on ESPN 62, on ESPN 62, it had, the tough finale, right? And it seemed like it had some other talent that just made a big splash. So let's go around, man. Who impressed you guys from that card, aside from the main event? Mike Bond, back to you.
I think it's got to be Michael Morales, right? Like, he passed the Neil Magny test, which, we've seen so many times before. Some of these guys flop and they're not ready for it, and some of these guys shine and they're able to really break through and show that they are a contender on the rise. And to win that way, to stay undefeated, I'm pretty excited by what this guy is capable of doing in the welterweight division. And yeah, like, you don't see, I know Magny's been around for a while. Maybe he's getting towards the end of his rope and stuff like that in terms of like still being able to really test these guys, but he's never hesitant to accept the fight, to take the challenge. And then it's on the other guy to see if he can withstand that classic Magny pressure, if he can not break in there or gas out, something that we've seen so many times. So I was very impressed by him, and I think he's got some real potential to make noise. Another one of these undefeated killers at welterweight. I mean, I don't know if they're outside of bantamweight. There's a division with like a better crop of up and coming guys that have like serious potential to break into the top 7, the top 5 eventually over the course of their careers. And I think he is absolutely one of those at 170 pounds. So pretty impressed by him and what he did in there, and really excited to see him get a big fight next.
Yeah, you beat Neil Magny, but you don't finish Neil Magny. He was impressive, and I'm glad you called him a killer on the podcast. They kept calling him a prospect. I'm like, he's 17-0. What prospect, man? This guy's a legit welterweight. Matt Wells, how about you, man? Who made you ooh and ah on Saturday night?
I mean, I was very impressed with Michael Morales as well, but I will go one division higher. Let's talk a little bit about GM3. and how this guy just is never out of fights, man. You can never count this dude out. He has a few losses in the UFC, but when he wins, he stops people. And he broke Anderson Silva's record. He was already tied with him, in the division for the most stoppage victories. But now he passed him. And anytime you pass Anderson Silva, that's a pretty big moment in my book. So shout out to GM3 for overcoming, very scary moments in that fight. We thought he was done. We thought Edmund was going to, get back on track. There's a lot to be said about him as well. But GM3's heart, man, you can never count that dude out. He's just so resilient. And once again, like I said, if he's going to win a fight, he's going to stop you. And there's just impressive stuff from him.
It's got to suck to get submitted by someone with an 80s porno stash. But yeah, GM3 is legit, man. No joke. That was beautiful execution after he got the takedown all the way to the arm triangle. Nolan King, how about you? Who caught your eye? Excuse me.
Yeah, I got to say, starting off the night, Kong Wong looked fantastic. I mean, talk about a debut from even before she fought, her debut was going well. To the face paint, with the dressed like the Joker at the weigh-ins, kind of breaking out her English to trash talk a little bit. Some of the pre-fight promos that have run through social media from different artistic sort of shoots she's done in the past with the Joker stuff was great. So to go out there, to have all that, she's got a lot going for her, right? Maybe from an I wouldn't say underrepresented because there's a champion, but it's a growing market, I think, for MMA fighters in Asia as well. So for her to come in first fight of the night and just get a 62-second one-punch knockout, and then have a little bit of spice on the mic as well. She's got a big personality. We saw that shine through even in her post-fight interview in the backstage with Kenny and the rest of the reporters, like mentioning Valentina's name. Like, she's doing all the right things. They have this Macau event coming up in November. It just seems like that she's somebody that, if they continue to play their cards right, is going to be somebody that's a star in that division, and particularly that market as well. So I'm really excited to see her back. I'm assuming it's going to be November 23rd on that Macau card, because I think she's 32 as well, and she's got a lot of experience. So I think she's somebody that they can give that fast track to, and not feel like they're being detrimental to her career as well. Just a very interesting fighter has emerged in this division.
Nolan, do you like the Joker nickname, or did she miss the boat? How about Queen Kong?
I like the Joker. It was interesting too. Like, I assumed because she dressed up like the Batman villain, that's why she did it. But she was explaining that it was meant to be a Joker, like the traded, like the playing card was what her name was based off of. So
she's legit, man.
I like it. It's
quite
unique,
a splash.
man. Yeah,
quite a splash. Yeah, I can't hate on that.
So
I like Myron.
She's more of a Jack Hermanson than a Marcus Perez type of Joker, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
That's true. I like Myron Santos, man. This guy is money. He just seems like the game is happening in slow motion. The way he's so accurate, he's so calm, poised. I just love it. And, the emotion he showed, you can tell how much this means to him. But everything he did, all of his techniques just were like very, very calculated. He looked like he's almost a few years more advanced than where he really is. But I can just tell this guy loves MMA. He's going to continue to get better. He's got a high ceiling. Great coach with Eric Nixick, to guide him. So I really like it. And, sometimes I'm crapping on the Ultimate Fighter, but man, they got themselves a couple good fighters out of this season. I can honestly say the season was a success, and now they got the coaches fight coming up. So that's good. We saw the last season, the coaches fight still hasn't come up, but this one is going to happen. Knock on wood. We'll see what happens. But yeah, Myron Santos is legit. And just a couple quick comments here before we move on. Joseph Boza kind of liked that that Caio's throwing out, calling out DDP and wanting a title fight. He says, do all call-outs have to be successful? He tried. And then Chris Goes Wild says, the only issue I have with Caio calling out DDP is that people are lined up to fight him. So that's unrealistic. Zinroof says, lots of laughs at Caio calling out DDP. No, just no. I guess he thinks it's too early. And Beastman want to give him a shout out. He was up early inside the chat room here. The chat room accompanies the show. Leave a comment or a question, and we'll try to include you. Obviously, the better ones get on. Hit that like button, folks. That's what Beast did. So why don't you follow suit there? All right, guys, let's move on here, man. Did you guys see Tom Aspinall last week? He's training. He wants in. says he's ready for November. He'll fight someone if they tell him now. He'll show up and weigh in as the sub. And if none of that happens, he'll be front row, ready for the winter to anoint him as the next champ. Mike, what do you think of Aspinall's latest antics?
I think it's about time, right? Like, he needed to put on this full court press and really try to get his name out there, because whatever he's been doing up to this point clearly has not been working or caused any movement. I don't know if this is going to change anything, but him, putting out little videos like he did here, little skits, I think it all is just going to help his cause, and it's greater stirs up the conversation of why are we doing Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, when clearly this man is the most deserving of the fight and potentially the best heavyweight in the world right now. So I think this was long due for Tom. I think maybe his only miss is kind of stirring the pot a little bit when it came to like the Stipe Miocic injury rumors. I don't know how valid that is or whatever the case may be in there. It seems like Stipe quickly came out and swatted that down and said, no, I'm completely fine. I'm ready to go. Fake news. So, you don't want to say a fighter is injured and like going to be out of a fight if there's no credence to it. I think that's maybe a bit of a bad look there, but whatever you got to do, I guess it still creates the headlines. It gets people excited. And yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens, I guess, coming up, but he needs to be there in November. If this fight happens, it still hasn't been announced, which is kind of interesting, right? Like the MSG card is official. The date, I think tickets go on sale soon. So maybe that's coming down the pipe any day now. But usually when they present, the event is happening, especially one, the magnitude of a Madison Square Garden, they like to have a main event attached right off the bat. And that is not the case right now. So you wonder if there is anything happening there. Maybe there is some validity to the injury claims. I don't know. But his opening is still there from all indications. Pen is not put to paper, which I guess means there's always a glimmer of hope. And he is doing what he needs to do right now to get something going for himself. So I guess credit to Tom for finally putting the pedal to the metal here when it comes to this whole thing.
I love it. Yep. The Duke full court press is in effect for sure. Nolan, how about you, man? Stipe did shoot it down like Mike said. He said fake news. He'll be ready to go. But are you buying or selling? Like, what do you think about this, man? Were you confident in what he said amidst everything I guess we hear on a day-to-day basis?
Like about Stipe or just in general?
Yeah, Miocic, and will the fight actually happen, or do you think we'll see Tom in there against someone?
Yeah, I think the fight will still happen. I don't think we have to sound the alarms yet, especially if Stipe is coming out and publicly saying that. I think, to me, the way Tom approached this more recent segment of his call-outs of Jon, I think is perfect, to be honest with you. I think he did it in a way that I think we've really grown to like Tom because of the way he carries himself in the sport, right? And so for him to all of a sudden have to be the guy that's being, trash talking and selling fights and being nasty to try to draw Jon in, I think the best way to go about this is the way that he did it. Like, he did it with a laugh. He did it in a way that he can say, oh, it's just fooling around. It's just joking. And it's enough to still get his name in every headline. Dana's talking about him at the Contender Series press conference. And so I think Aspinall knocked this one out of the park. And I think, to me, I still think Stipe is going to be next. I think Dana said this too many times for that not to be the case. I think an injury or something really out of left field would have to come through and kind of destroy that. We've seen that happen in MMA. I mean, how many times have crazy things popped up at the last second? So can never say never, but I do think November, Jon Jones, Stipe, barring anybody getting hurt again, we'll see that one next.
I forgot
if someone did get hurt, what do you think they would do? Like, if Stipe wasn't available for November, do you think Jon would say, if he's ready by March or April, I'm just going to keep waiting? Or do you think at that point the UFC would get a little irritated and be like, okay, well, we'll at least offer you Tom for November, and if you accept it, great. If not, okay.
Yeesh. For one, guys, I get the vibes that Miocic Jones just isn't going to happen. From how Dana's tackled it, and like you said, Mike, where's the promotion? And their age, and Jones is coming off a serious injury. So I think they offer it to Tom, and I think Jones either has to fight or basically, I don't know about retire or just back away while Tom Aspinall becomes the undisputed, and I guess take someone else on. I don't know. I really don't know.
That clip I just put on is like 18 months old now. It's crazy.
Well, Jones has
It's crazy.
replied. He has given some replies to Aspinall. Do you like the approach he's taking, Matt? You know, because he's a gangster no matter what. He is the greatest of all time, but on the way out, it's not a good look a little bit.
No, I'm not a fan of this heavyweight run of Jon Jones by any means, man, because yes, you went in there and you beat Cyril Gane, but we all know Cyril Gane has a glaring hole in his game, a hole that you are actually very good at when it comes to wrestling. So I think everybody saw that path to victory for him, and you know, it wasn't really, I mean, yes, it was impressive to go up there and do it, but it wasn't like he was tested in any way, so to speak. It was just a higher weight. I don't like this at all, man, because everybody, except for him, Dana White, and Stipe, you know, want this fight, or you know, want to see him fight Tom Aspinall. So it just doesn't make sense to me how he can be so dismissive of it and saying that Tom Aspinall doesn't deserve it, and he's got Dana saying that Tom Aspinall doesn't deserve it, and it's crazy because he's holding an interim title and defending it. It's ridiculous how they're just kind of playing it off as Tom Aspinall isn't a threat. He's not credible, yada, yada. Stipe's still a GOAT. Stipe is 42 years old and hasn't won a fight since 2020. I mean, it's crazy. It feels like I'm in the Twilight Zone sometimes. Like when I see these back and forth interactions, you know, on social media, it's kind of crazy. I do love the way that Tom is handling it because he also has to be a little bit careful because I think this time next year, Tom Aspinall is going to be the guy that we're talking about. Like, clearly, Jon Jones, I think, will be out of the picture by this time next year. He'll probably retire after the Stipe fight. Since he's already hinting at it, there's no reason not to believe him. I mean, so he's got to be careful not to piss off the UFC in this whole process, right? Because Tom Aspinall is going to be the guy in I don't know, 12 months' time or less. He's going to be the guy at the top of the division that the UFC is going to have to start propping up as the guy. You know, the only other guy.
So what does he have to
Jon
lose
Jones
then, right? If that's the scenario, like if you're going to be the guy regardless, you might as well go all in. And you know, what are they going to do if you piss them off a little bit?
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference if we're talking about him a year from now as the guy who fought and beat Jon Jones, or if the guy who just took over once he moved on. So if his window is that small, I don't blame him for doing everything he can to try to get the fight. You got to, because that once that window's
also,
gone,
if he doesn't fight him, he can also say, "I'm the guy that Jon Jones ducked." And he'll have a lot of credible evidence to back that up.
I retired him without fighting him was, I think, his quote in one of those videos. That was the killer.
That's such a sick line.
And, you know, the whole legacy term that gets thrown out, I always say once your legacy's created, it's there. But he also has that whole, you know, for 3 years, one could say he avoided Francis Ngannou. You know, Francis didn't just leave right after he won it. Like, he had a title defense and then some time in between where Jon Jones was getting big and getting prepped or whatever, but that was a long road, you know. And then finally, once he was out, then all of a sudden the path was clear. So that's two big heavyweight names that he just somehow will not have fought if in fact he doesn't fight Aspinall, because Miocic isn't ready to go and he bows out of the sport. So he really should think this one through. I just want to see. I want to see Aspinall get his, whether it's through Jones or just someone else. But let's clear this thing up, man. It is a mess. Yeah. It sucks. And look at Nolan. Do you want to say something?
No, I was going to say, I honestly think like Jon could be talked into this too. Like, I think there is an element of this when Jon came back and he wanted to take 2 more fights. Like, I think the heavyweight title / Francis, you know, there was a little bit of overlap at time where Francis was still in the picture and Jon was willing to fight him. And then Francis left. And then I think the Gane Blades thing to Jon was a little like blah, like, oh, maybe we'll fight Gane, maybe we'll fight Blades for a title. But I think the heavyweight title was the interesting thing to him there, right? And I think with Stipe, he still seems to hold Stipe's name in very high regard. Like, he's one of the greatest heavyweights ever. I can put him on my resume as well. And so we started to see that with Alex Pereira, like when Jon was putting these tweets out about like wanting to fight him and think about the numbers that could do and yada, yada, yada. So I think with Aspinall's growing value here, I do think that he could be talked into this. Like, I don't think Jon's very dismissive when it comes to the future, but I genuinely think what Aspinall's doing could very well work. And I mean, he's winning too. I mean, I think that's a big part of it. So this could all be just some sort of build to make the fight seem bigger as well. I think whether it's intentional or not on Jon's part, I do think circumstantially there will be a very good likelihood that when it comes time that Aspinall is the guy that he can either fight or he can retire. I do think that he'll end up. I think he'll end up fighting Tom.
And that was kind of one of the end tweets of his long string there, right? In response was, maybe the UFC will offer me a bag I can't refuse. And Dana was asked about that at the Contender Series press conference. He's like, well, exactly. There you go. So I think he knows the game Jon is playing here when it comes to that. I don't necessarily agree with his follow-up statement saying, what fight have we not made when it comes to stuff like this? There is abundance of them, including one involving Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. But, obviously Anderson Silva, GSP, the list goes on. So there is flaw to that. But when there's a will, there's a way. And if the UFC wants that fight bad enough, I'm sure, maybe they make it worth Jon's while. I don't know.
Yeah. Fedor and Brock, Fedor and Randy, Cyborg and Rousey. I don't know if Cyborg could have ever made 140, but maybe you could have given Rousey enough of a bag to do 145. Matt Wells, go ahead.
Yeah, no. While you're there talking about fights that didn't get made, don't buy this revisionist history Dana's trying to put out now about the Ngannou Jones fight. Mm-hmm. He's on record saying that Jon Jones didn't want the fight, telling him to go back down to middleweight. Like there's a bunch of things he said about Jon Jones not wanting to fight Francis Ngannou. Today he's telling a different story. So the timelines just don't match up. I'll just say that.
Yeah, his revisionist history is questionable. Trump's loyal. Remember when he was with Affliction? He hated him. He had to counter program him. James Irvin versus Anderson Silva. On 3 weeks' notice, he put that card together. Anyway, all right. Guess who's got it together, though? PFL. They got two bigger heavyweights, maybe, even sizing up each other. They did it at the press conference, and then all week as they had their last playoff card out in DC. So their upcoming pay-per-view, it's called PFL Super Fights Battle of the Giants. And in that main event, former UFC heavyweight champion Francis Ngannou will make his PFL debut. His opponent, 2023 PFL champ, Renan Ferreira. Do you like the way the PFL is promoting these guys? Mike, did they nail the marketing?
I don't know. I think it's a little too early to tell. I think I think they did what they needed to do, right? You finally got these two in a room. You failed to get Francis Ngannou in the cage when Ferreira knocked out Ryan Bader in that Bellator versus PFL thing. He was cage side and he kind of took off before they had the opportunity to do that. So to see these two absolutely like hulking, gigantic men stand side by side next to each other, like, okay, this is a legit heavyweight fight in terms of the size, the power of all these guys. So this is what PFL has been waiting for, right? Like people had their doubts Ngannou was ever going to actually fight there. It was just kind of a marketing ploy, all these things. They made all these signings that have yet to actually come to fruition in terms of fights. So they got Francis to sign on for a fight here. They have a date, they have a location. This is a big deal for them. I don't think it's going to be breaking any records on pay-per-view or anything, but it'll probably be their most successful pay-per-view offering to date, more so than their championship finals events. So yeah, this is a huge deal for them. And Francis, man, could there be like a more compelling time, for better or worse, for him to be making this debut, coming off the brutal knockout to Anthony Joshua, the personal tragedy that he went through losing his 15-month-old son earlier this year. So like you got a lot of questions about where he's at mentally, physically too. I mean, his knees were all sort of busted up after the fight with Ciryl Gane. He needed those major surgeries, and we've yet to see him defend a takedown, grapple, any of that stuff. I don't know if this is necessarily the fight where he's going to have to display all that, but at least it's a question, right? There's a lot more lateral movement, kicking, all that stuff in MMA. So we're going to find out what's up with Francis Ngannou. And yeah, this is a big fight for PFL. So I think they're on the right track here. We'll see what these guys do over the next couple months. We'll get into, the press conference kind of misinterpretation and everything there with Ferreira's comments, but that had people talking at least. And it's something that brings more attention to this fight, even if it was maybe blown out of proportion or misinterpreted or whatever.
Yeah. And Matt, we'll pivot to you with that topic about Ferreira's comments. He obviously has had a year where he got knocked out by Anthony Joshua. And Ferreira obviously is saying, look, you got more problems. This is going to be the biggest problem of the year. he then came back and said, "Hey, look, I wasn't talking about the death of his son. I was just talking about the Joshua fight. I'm going to be a worse, I guess we'll say, nightmare, to him for 2024 than that." But what were your thoughts on that? What were your thoughts on the press conference and then this whole marketing, man? They're calling him, it's a super fight, Battle of the Giants. I almost feel like it's becoming a bigger deal than what's going to happen less than a month afterwards in New York.
Yeah. So first on the comments, like when I heard the comments, I saw the reaction immediately, obviously on social media. Like everybody was like, "Oh wow, that's such a terrible thing to say." But also, I also kind of felt like it was a little lost in translation thing there, because you've never really heard him talk like that before. He's always seemed like a pretty cool dude, not like a guy that's going to go, take a low road or take cheap shots or anything like that. So I was kind of like, wait and see. Let's wait for some clarification. And then he obviously came out and said that, that's not what I meant by any means. He was strictly talking about what happened inside the ring there for Francis. So that was good that he cleared that up, and I believe him. You got to take him at his word for that, because again, he doesn't have a track record of being that guy. So I liked that from him. As far as the whole promotion of the fight as well, I think they're doing it the right way, calling it the Battle of the Giants, getting these two men just standing in front of each other again, like at this face off at the press conference, and right here as you see in the cage there. It's good because they're both huge men, and they have Jake Paul like he's fighting for his life, trying to keep them separated there. Is an interesting little touch. But seeing Renan Ferreira just tower over Francis Ngannou, if you are just someone tuning in for like the first or second time, you're like, wow, this dude is huge, and you're wondering like, how is Francis going to overcome this? So it makes it a little intriguing. There's interesting elements to the fight as well when you start getting to the X's and O's of things, like how it could play out. But I do like how they are unveiling it and leading to this big showdown.
Two big dudes, man, just feeling each other, and patting each other down, but you could tell they were giants. What was with Jake Paul too, man? Did he lose his luggage or what? What was that outfit? Nolan King, man, is this fight here like almost a bigger deal than the one in New York in your eyes? I mean, we have the guy that left as a UFC champion. He wasn't beaten. He left as champ, signed with PFL against Renan Ferreira, who won the previous season. Then he beat the Bellator champ. Honestly, if he beats Ngannou, he's going to have a certain claim at the end of the year as well. Baddest man on the planet. I mean, this thing is really, really exciting when you think about it, with everything that's happening within a month.
Yeah, it's big. I don't know if I would say bigger than Jon Jones, just because of the name recognition, the UFC brand. I mean, but that's what PFL's up against, right? Any promotion outside the UFC, it's going to be an uphill battle. But there were two aspects of this that surprised me in a positive way when it came to this booking. And one is when Francis left the UFC. I mean, I think the discussions we were having on here and just behind the scenes and everything was like, who is there to fight in MMA that would be even remotely intriguing for us to watch, right? Like, and PFL found somebody, and they didn't go out and get a free agent or a former UFC fighter that had left or whatever. They built somebody that had been there for a while from the ground up, from his days in LFA till now. He's fought for them. So they made him into something that was intriguing to watch. He obviously played a huge part in that. Like, he went out there and he won fights. He looked good. He got devastating knockouts. His size helps. And you think about Bellator, right? When Bellator was around, like, even when they were competing with the UFC, like, what heavyweights did they ever build that ended up getting themselves involved in an intriguing fight? Like, I think like there was Valentin Moldavsky and guys like that who were their champions at times. But after Minikov left, there really wasn't anybody that was a homegrown talent in Bellator at heavyweight. It's a very hard thing to do. So for PFL to be able to go out there and get a relevant fight is huge. And then also, to be quite honest, I'm surprised that this is happening like in October. That was another thing. When Francis went on into his boxing, I was like, man, we might be here for a while before we see him in MMA, right? And sure, he went out there, he fought Fury, he fought Joshua. It's not like he was gone from MMA for 3 months, but for them to be able to find a fight, to get it done, within a regular period of time between his Joshua fight and here, which we can talk about whether that's good or bad for his health or whatever. I do think it's a big feather in PFL's cap that they were able to get this on the books too. So Sure, the challenges still exist. I don't think the pay-per-view numbers are going to be particularly great. We'll see. But I do think they have a fight that will get people talking, involving one of the biggest stars at heavyweight that the sport's ever seen. And it's an intriguing matchup. How many times does Francis Ngannou have to look straight ahead or up when he's in a face-off, right? So I really can't think of many complaints when you think of it for what it is that I could have about this booking.
UFC branding aside, I'm more excited about this fight. And all that aside, I think the baddest man on the planet right now is actually Tom Aspinall, and he doesn't even have a fight. But whatever, guys. Oh man, what a mess this thing is. But hey, October 19th, that fight goes down, and then I think it's November 16th, UFC 308 goes down, I believe. 309 goes down. So it'll all be sorted out. We'll know who the baddest man on the planet is in a few months. Let's do this news roundup. There's other news other than the big dudes. MMA Junkie spoke with some big names this past week. And you know what? This is a good time. The World MMA Awards is out there. MMA Junkie's been kicking ass, not just this year, but for the last 17, 18 years. How about you go to worldmmaAwards.com? We're up for Best Media Source. Nolan King's up for Best Journalist. Give us your vote if you think we deserve it. Obviously, you're here for a reason, but we put out quality work. And that was just my shameless plug there. We got some highlights for you guys, though. The featherweight champ spoke with Mike Bond. Mike, Ilia Topuria, you spoke with him for quite a bit. He had some interesting things to say. Let's start off with O'Malley and Holloway on the same night. And then he had some other stuff to say about the Irishman, but is he kind of going a little too far, with being so brash, or do you kind of like his swag?
I mean, if you thought like the tweets were written by someone else, or if he was just like gets some hot Twitter fingers and is more bold online, no, we have like 30 minutes of video footage of him just saying everything that you could possibly imagine in terms of like aggressive talk towards his opponent, saying he's gonna knock Max Holloway out in the first round, which feels like an unfathomable feat, but if he does it, my God. And then just everything else, saying he would beat O'Malley and Holloway on the same night, which is just a crazy thing to even utter and call Max Holloway an easy fight. I mean, that's just outrageous. But if he goes out and backs it up, I mean, holy hell. But yeah, I mean, the only person he seemed to really like give some respect to was Islam Makhachev when I brought that up. But even then, he's like, I'd show there's levels to this game with him, which is a wild thing to say. So yeah, man, I mean, there's confidence, and then there's crazy, and then there's, I don't know where he falls on this line right now, but I guess rightfully so. He's 15-0, just knocked out Alexander Volkanovski. There's no reason to not believe that you can do whatever you want in the sport, I guess, for him right now. But yeah, to actually hear it and all that stuff, it was a little bit, had me a little bit awestruck, but I mean, good for him. We'll see what happens in the cage on October 26th in Abu Dhabi, but he's building this fight up the right way, man. And I think you don't see Max Holloway, as I kind of alluded to him, going out there like sending stuff in response when he said a couple of weeks ago that like Max wasn't signing the contract and that he was the holdup for the fight. Like Max didn't like that, and he made sure to clarify it. So he's getting something out of Max here that you don't see too often in the lead up to these fights, and that just makes it all the more captivating to see what's going to happen at UFC 308. So yeah, I appreciate his time. I appreciate him being so thoughtful and open and honest about what he believes he's going to be doing in the next little bit here. And I mean, obviously, we're never going to see him fight Max Holloway and Sean O'Malley on the same night, but I don't think it's unrealistic that he fights them individually coming up here in the future. So, very bold words from the champ.
And it's all here on this channel, folks. So subscribe and check it out after spinning Back Clique. Of course, Matt Wells, he also told Mike Bond, Conor, who obviously is the big payday, he doesn't even deserve to share the octagon with him right now. He's kind of not interested. Now, obviously, I don't think he would decline the fight, but what did you think of that take? Messing around with the Irishman, that guy can get a little testy on social media.
Yeah, I kind of mentioned it earlier, right? How about, everybody's calling or making references to Alex Pereira now. Topuria seems to be the only guy still poking at Conor a lot these days, and it's funny because, I think the size difference, like if we're talking about them actually getting into the cage, like now in 2024, 2025, I think the size difference would be very interesting to say the least. Like what weight would that fight take place at? You know, Connor doesn't seem very interested in coming back down to 155 anytime soon. I don't know. It's interesting. It's funny because I think Ilia has some points when he says that as well, because he's actually out here right now doing the damn thing when Connor's just enjoying, you know, the fruits of his labors in 2015, 2016 in those days. But it's always funny. I love the trash talk Ilia brings. This interview is fantastic. I love the Max and Sean line as well. It's funny because the dude he's talking some mad trash, but he's also going out there and he's backing it up every time he steps into the octagon. So you can't really hate him too much.
Undefeated. I mean, he's on clouds right now. He can say
And
what
I guess
he wants.
one thing, curious what you guys think. Do we all agree BMF title should not be on the line? Like, it's an undisputed fight, but it is kind of weird if Max loses. But that was, I guess, like one of the newsworthy things that he confirmed that it would not be on the line, which is something that UFC did not share one way or another when they announced this fight officially.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. It feels weird to me because I have a feeling that if Max wins, I have a feeling that there will be a BMF title in that cage and he's going to hold two belts over his shoulders, right? So it's kind of weird that Ilia won't have that same opportunity if he wins. So I don't know.
I like that it maybe gets freed up for another two to bail out the UFC with the strict schedule that they had. But I think Topuria was right in requesting it and making it sound like if you don't do it, then I'm not fighting you. But that blew up in his face. That's why this whole Connor thing, you got it with your trash talk. You got to sound believable. He doesn't deserve to share the octagon with me. You know that if he offers it, if Dana White offers it to him, he would take it because it's a tremendous payday. That's why Michael Chandler's sitting around waiting with his tuxedo to be, the groomsman or whatever. But Nolan, you had a great interview with Henry Cejudo as well. You spent some time with the former flyweight and bantamweight champ who's got options. I mean, I thought he had closed his career to going down to 125, but he told you he's open to it. In fact, he was asking you for advice.
Yeah. I like this move a lot, to be honest with you. I think sometimes when fighters get kind of stuck, like, in their division, he's coming off back-to-back losses. He needs a fresh start. I think moving to a different division makes a lot of sense. The weight cut would have to be something that he talked about it. He said it's not easy. It's something he'd really have to think about if he wants to do that again, because, the quality of life of making that sort of cut is brutal. So those are certain things that I can't necessarily jump into an athlete's mind and tell them how they feel or what they have to do. Like, how much of it's discipline, how much of it is your actual biology, how much of it is your age, how much can you not even predict? But at the same time, if all else is equal, like, I think new life at 125 definitely exists for him. He would energize the division. I think if you look at that division right now, there's Pantoja, obviously the champ. You got Asakura, who's coming in. We don't really know where he's going to fit, but it sounds like he could end up with the title fight. And then you've got, guys like Tyra, who's on the come up, and some other contenders that are moving up as well, and Albazi. But for me, I think having Henry in that division would not only give perhaps some of those guys like big fight opportunities. I mean, the Brandon Moreno fight he was talking about, I think would do great numbers especially if they put that in Mexico. Like, what a scene that would be, right? I think there's just so many options there where he could be 1 or 2 wins away from a title, where I don't see that at bantamweight. And I think he was very intelligent when he said, he was very self-aware. He's saying, look at this division right now. Look at how much it's thriving, right? And so for me to come in off 2 losses and try to make a splash again is so difficult. So I really think he should go down to 125. I think it would make a lot of sense as long as his body can do it. I know he struggled in the past, way earlier on in his career. And I don't love big weight cuts, but if he can do it and not totally deplete himself and make himself not as good in the cage, then I think it makes the most sense if he's going for gold.
Mike, do you think his cringe is missed? I mean, it's cringy, right? The word explains itself as like, we don't want to hear it. But in a way, I kind of miss it. And he did stir the pot. Did you miss it? And do you think it'd do well at flyweight?
If he could make the weight, comfortably, as everything Nolan said there is right about him actually, being at that division. But if he can make it again, I mean, not something I would advise at 38 years old. That photo I put on the screen a minute or two ago of him looking gaunt as hell in his last cut down to 125, not a great physical look, but he's spent a lifetime cutting weight, all that stuff. If he believes he can do it and wants to put it forward, yeah. And he would be missed in that division to have him there. Like, the thing I think that's kind of holding Alexandre Pantoja back a little bit is like he doesn't have these big names, these former champions he can beat. Yeah, he's, the Brandon Moreno thing is a huge feather in his cap, but never got a chance at Demetrius Johnson, didn't get, I don't think, a chance at Davison Figueiredo, things like that. So now for him to get someone like Cejudo, I think would be huge for his resume and could maybe kind of put him over. Cejudo would sell the fight, all that stuff. So I think that would be big for him. And yeah, I think 125 needs someone like Henry Cejudo, because right now Pantoja has wiped out everyone there, some of them twice over, and we need someone fresh like Henry Cejudo, I think, for him.
Pantoja is who we coached on The Ultimate Fighter, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I think so, yeah. There's that whole element as well.
They're kind of cool, but I think for a title they would fight, it sounds like. Joseph Bose in the chat says, does Cejudo think flyweight is easier now after losing to Merab in February? By the way, Merab's teased flyweight at some point as well. We'll see how it goes at Noche UFC. Frozen like Elsa says, flyweights will pack up Henry. He's done. A few more here. Let's see here. Joseph Boza says he needs the motivation to carry. Merab was a good loss. It feels like he wants to go down because he knows the UFC is desperate with Pantoja beating everybody. Beast Man says, Mike, are you controlling the scenes with the footage and the photos too? You are a talented mofo. Yep, that's right. Guys, we spoke to Bilal Muhammad.
Now we know Mike's burner account name.
I don't have enough time to also leave comments about myself. I mean, come on. I only do that on the other shows.
Yeah.
Bilal Muhammad says Usman needs another win. Fair. He's 0-3, I guess. Shavkat needs another high-profile win because he says, you just beat Wonder Boy. I had to beat 3 more guys after I beat Wonder Boy to get a title shot. He says he wants JDM. Do you like that fight? Is that the right fight to make? In December is when he would want to do it. Matt Wells, what are your thoughts?
I like it. It makes sense, but also it's kind of interesting that Bilal also said that he wants to be like the Alex Pereira, just to step up and fight any and everybody, but you're also discrediting a number of potential contenders from being worthy of stepping up. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting, a little bit talking out of both sides there, but I think Bilal against anybody, and, if he also gets one in before the end of the year, that'd be great. JDM's right there. I mean, he's ranked number 5 in the UFC rankings. I mean, it would make sense. I mean, we also know that the UFC really doesn't care about the rankings when, you see Khalil Rountree, you get a shot out of nowhere. So, it would be a good matchup. I think stylistically it would be interesting to see how Bully would deal with the hands of JDM. So I like it. I like the matchup on paper.
It was interesting, that call out. I wasn't expecting that because I'm just programmed to think that the champions always want the one that's going to sell the most pay-per-views. He wants to be a busy champion, Nolan, is what he said. Unlike Leon Edwards, is what he said. What's the perfect schedule nowadays for the ones that wear gold? You see guys like Izzy and Volkanovski. Wow, they made it to 5 title defenses, but man, at some point it seems like they run into a wall. And then you got a guy like Leon Edwards who just didn't seem to fight very often, and so we all kind of forgot about him. Maybe he didn't enjoy the ride as much as he should have. Do you like Bilal and what he wants to do, and do you think being a frequent defender of the title is the way to go?
Yeah, I think 2 times a year would be ideal for most champions. I think some of the bigger weight classes where the fights end so quick and there's not really these wars, like guys can pull off 3. I think that's part of what's going on with Alex Pereira, right? Like, I think his ability to take so many fights is the fact that he's not getting in these 5-round wars of everybody, Kyle Barallo and Jared Cannonier, if they fought, if that sort of a fight happens in a title fight, like those guys aren't going to be able to, their brains aren't going to hold up to fight 3 times a year. So I appreciate the activity. I know the UFC has a huge calendar too. I'm sure they very much appreciate it, where they promise certain locations to title fights. And I think that's sometimes why we see the BMF title come into play, is that they have kind of a quota to keep up, right? So I'm sure the UFC loves to hear that. I think for somebody to fight at their best, depends on the division, depends on what kind of fights you're getting in. But twice a year for a welterweight, I think would be ideal. If he can squeeze 3, that's great as well. But let's see what kind of wars he's going to get in these title fights before we start trying to put too much pressure on him to push it.
God bless Alex Fajeda, man. It was just over a year when he got laid out in Miami, and look what he's done since then. And we're all giving him his flowers, and he deserves it. All right, so let's move on to our final topic: UFC 306, the Noche here. UFC brought to you by Riazzi. So many things going on there. Listen, Dana White is none too happy with Merab Dvalishvili, and Sean O'Malley isn't too happy with the UFC's promotion strategy. So let's cover that. Let's start with the clip of White fielding a question after last week's Dana White Contender Series. It's also on MMA Junkie's YouTube. You can check it out. He was asked about the Machine's latest social media post. Let's go to that.
Merab's cut. What do you know about Merab's cutting? Can you make any?
The whole world knows about Merab's cut. He posted it. I mean, I don't. Our guys are so dumb. It's next level, unbelievable. It's all the stuff that I talk about boxing. What I will give boxing is when something happens in a camp, man. Let me tell you what. It does not leak. You know, our guys can't fucking wait to throw it up on social media. It's a small cut. It's no big deal, but obviously needed to be posted.
Against a guy like O'Malley, who's a sharpshooter and who's a very accurate puncher, now all of a sudden there's a big target for him.
And why the fuck would you want him to know that? Yeah. It is next level stupid. Some of these guys are so stupid, it's mind-boggling. It's unbelievable.
Beastman in the chat says Dana White is 100% right about that. Do you guys agree? We'll start with Mike. What did you think of is Merab just out there putting it out there? Maybe could that come back and bite him in the ass? Because you got a commission issue as well where they look into it and what they can deem, is appropriate recovery from a cut like that or not. And then the other thing is now the opponent knows where to target.
Yeah, I think that has probably the most to do with it. And if you heard an answer from Dana later in the scrum where he got asked, like, is there, a backup or another alternative in case Merab couldn't go for whatever, he was like, please don't even bring that up because they have so much money invested in the production for the show. Like all those crazy commercials that they did, all the graphics, all the things on the outside of the sphere, the inside, to have to redo all that stuff, I would imagine would be millions and millions of dollars lost. So that's probably what first came to his mind when he saw that, like, oh my God, could this fight be in jeopardy? And then for it not to be, it's just like, again, why would you share that? You're giving Sean O'Malley a target. I know Aljamain Sterling kind of came to Merab's defense on social media and was like, this is a guy that documents everything, the goods, the bad, the highs, the lows of his training camp. But it just seems like an opportune time. Like, what are you trying to prove here? Are you getting... we're not applauding him for doing that. Cuts happen, things like this happen in camps all the time, but it's something you probably want to conceal from your opponent, from the commissions, UFC, all that stuff. So maybe Dana could have said it in a little more gracious way, but this is classic Dana White. This is what people, love him for better or worse, his, complete bluntness when it comes to things like this. So I can't get mad at him. I don't think it was the brightest thing in the world for Merab to do. We'll see if it backfires on him come fight night. If that cut does get split open, that could be, something he truly regrets, but we'll see what happens there. But yeah, this is one of those ones where I can't really hate on Dana too much for reacting the way that he did.
I gotta agree, man. I was laughing as well. I think Sterling and Merab should just take the L. It probably just what didn't need to be posted. Let me ask Matt Wells this. Michael Bisping was talking to Sean O'Malley, and he seemed a little bitter that the Sphere is the star of Noche UFC. And only recently, are things picking up. He says, I'm the one doing interviews, not the Sphere's not doing any interviews. What are your thoughts on that? We know that O'Malley looks after his own career and he's on top of things like that, Matt. Is he out of line in any way, or does he have a point?
Not really. In my opinion, I don't think he has that much of a point because, yes, the Sphere is obviously the star of this show. The venue, the one of one. It's going to be a one and done at this spectacular venue. We've spent millions and millions of dollars to bring you this spectacular show that will never be done again, says Dana White over and over and over and over again. It's almost like we don't care who's on the card at this point. It's all about the Sphere, right? And also, when you consider the fact that Sean is not a Mexican fighter. when you have a Mexican champion fighting on the co-main who should be in the main event in Alexa Grasso. Yeah, I think the promotion is just fine in my opinion, because Alexa Grasso should have been in this main event, considering the whole celebration of Mexican Independence Day, presented by Riyadh in Las Vegas, sponsored by Bud Light. I don't know. It's all a mess in a lot of ways, but yeah, I don't think Sean has a super strong leg to stand on when he was brought in to headline this card over a Mexican champion on a Mexican themed event.
Yeah, and I've been checking my mail every day because I'm a Mexican. He says it's a love letter to the Mexican people, and I've yet to receive that envelope, so I'm waiting for that letter. Nolan, any final thoughts, man? UFC, the Noche UFC is going to be tremendous, but any thoughts on either one of those two before we bounce?
No, I'm excited for it. I think O'Malley's comments, like, I don't think he's wrong, but I also don't think it's like unique to the situation. You know, like, I think sometimes, like we said it recently with even Izzy and Dricus, right? Like, it was like, oh, all of a sudden, like this big middleweight fight that, you know, we've been talking about for kind of on and off for the last year is all of a sudden like, oh, it's here, you know? And then we see the promos that week and stuff. So I could understand in general, like some of the, maybe those kind of Izzy level, O'Malley level stars being like, can we have a couple weeks of promotion? Can we have a promo come out at the beginning of the month or 3 weeks before or 4 weeks before or whatever? So I get it. But I also think, like Matt said, I mean, everybody's going to be talking about the Sphere. Like, it's the Sphere event. That's what it is. So I don't know. I don't know. It is what it is.
Great job this week, guys.
On the list of things to complain about, in the list of things to complain about in MMA, I think it's maybe a valid complaint, but it's kind of far down the list, you know.
Mm-hmm. Karate Ted Tunes is saying that there is an outrageous ticket price. People should pay attention to that. It's a one-time event, but he thinks it'll repeat. I think they're gonna knock it out of the park. I think they'll repeat it too, but we'll see. I don't know. One quick question that came in. Beastman says, "How'd you guys come up with spinning back click?" Goes from MMA Junkie Radio came up with it. He took obviously a fighting term and then the word click. So pretty easy to put together there. I don't know. He's corny. So take it up with him next week when he's back. Oh, no, sorry. Next week we're off, folks, for Labor Day. So thank you all for tuning in. And when we come back, remember, as Dana White Contender Series is happening still, we don't want to go head to head with the weigh-ins on MMA Junkie. They were before us, right? They do 24-hour weigh-ins or 36-hour weigh-ins before us. So that's why we're going at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Once that's done, we'll notify you. We'll be back to our normal start time of noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. And don't forget, if you want to consume this as a podcast, it is available as a podcast the following day. Omni, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you grab your podcast. That's where we are. I want to thank Nolan King, Matt Wells, and Mike Bond. Mike Bond two-time because he was also our producer. We'll see you all next week on Spinning Back Click. Go out and be a champion.